Today we're gonna go ahead and talk about some poetry that I have on my mind, just because that's kind of what I've been exploring for the past couple of months. My neck is hurting me. I have no idea why. I can't tell you why. Um, so let's take a look at them. So I have a Kindle. I do. Okay. And I actually didn't get myself this Kindle. Someone got it for me as a gift. So yeah, but I'm not really I never really thought of myself as like a Kindle person. But it's getting to the point where I have so many books that it's like overtaking my space. Um, yeah, it's just I have so many books, and the thing is too is like some of these books I attach memories to as well, like memories, and it's usually like moments in my life too. So I have a hard time like taking them to like a half price store or like, selling them or something. Um, I like my physical copies. I really do. I'm obsessed with physical copies. But as I said, it's getting to a point where I have too many books and not enough space to accommodate all of those books. So, I think the nice thing about this Kindle is that now I'm able to like organize. So what I do is I'm organizing my poems, um, mostly my poems. My poems stay in this Kindle, or I try to have them in the Kindle, and then personal essays and things like that in the Kindle, if I can. If I buy it, that means and it's like under that category, and I buy it, and there's a reason why I thought like, okay, I need to buy this. But when it comes to fiction, yeah. Fiction, I could never have it in my Kindle. I could never. So, yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the poetry books that I have read recently actually. So I've been interested in exploring more Muslim poets specifically, just because I feel like the posts that I do see that are Muslim, of course, I know I'm aware that I'm not exposed to every single poet, but the ones that I've seen better writing. So that's why. That's why I've been more intentional about looking to see which Muslim poets have been published and to see what I could read, just to kind of see like how do they write, what is the writing style like, what kind of themes do they focus on, and also oftentimes poets they write from their own experiences. Now that's not to say that you have to write from your own experiences. I think that's something that people forget, and we bring this up a lot in education. What's wrong with my hijab today? We bring this a lot. Okay, it's just not okay. We bring this a lot up in education, right, where we talk about poetry and the speaker's voice and the speaker's voice and the actual author, and how those two things are separate. Now they can be the same. Um, and I think people make a mistake that they always have to be the same. No, they do not have to always be the same. They can be different. So that was just a lot. That was just a spiel. But anyways, so I read two poetry books by Mosab Taha, who's a Palestinian poet, right? Now, I actually read his work backwards, because I found out about his latest work first, and then I went back and I purchased the work that he had published before. So the first one that I had read of his is Forest of Noise, okay? And it's a collection of poetry that he has written, and both of his books are written about his experience in Gaza, okay? And his experience with the ongoing genocide. Inshallah, this video doesn't get deleted. But yeah, so he talks about his experiences. Now, so that's one of his books, Forest of Noise, and then the one before that is Things. Wait. See, the thing is, when I have my Kindle, when I finish reading it, it puts like a ribbon, like red, and then I cannot read. Can't see the title. Second. Okay, I got the title. So the other book that he wrote is Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. So Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear is his older poem, like his older poetry collection. I don't even know how to say that, honestly, because I know there's poetry chapbooks, but this is not a chapbook because this is an actual book. So I'm just gonna say poetry collection. Okay. And it's titled this. So it's titled Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, right? Um, so he wrote this. This was his older one. Yeah, I read this second. So for me, as a reader, reading First of Noise first and then going backwards, I could see the evolution of his writing. I really could. I felt like Forest of Noise, some of his poems, I had to read them again because he made some allusions that I didn't necessarily understand. So he made some allusions that I didn't necessarily understand. So I had to stop for a moment and then go back and actually read it. So, so I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. One second. Let me recollect my thoughts. All right. Okay. So essentially, in his book, which one was I talking about? I was talking about Forest of Noise. All right. Now, where did Forest? Okay, there's Forest of Noise. So, Forest of Noise, he talks about his experiences in Gaza. Now, some of his poetry, because it has a lot of allusions, you have to kind of go back and read it and sit with it. And I took a lot of notes as I was reading and I was annotating. Now, he has, I like the way he writes. I'm not gonna, poetry is kind of hard to describe, honestly, but I like the way he writes. It, he's really good at describing silence. That's what I noticed about him. He's really good at describing silence, and because he's good at describing silence, it made me grow as a poet as well. I think a lot of times poetry, at least nowadays, the oversaturated poetry, like the modern contemporary poetry that I've seen online, um, it focuses a lot on relationships, but it seems to have forgotten that there's more to poetry than writing about relationships all the time, especially like romantic relationships. There's other relationships too that you can talk about and write about. Very like close relationships you can have. You can talk about relationships with parents, relationships with siblings. You can talk about relationships with friends. You could talk about relationships with someone that you met at the grocery store. And I think mosab, he does a good job of describing the silence and also describing the mundane in a way that makes you look at it in a fresh way, because that's ultimately what poetry is supposed to be about, right? Now, when you go back, so I that was my first introduction to his to his read writing. Okay. When you go back and you read Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, so that's his older poetry collection. This one, it felt like it was a blend between poetry and personal essay, kind of. It felt like he was kind of dabbling into poetry. Now, that's just my impression as a reader. I also think because I went back, I could see his evolution as a writer. So I'm definitely going to say that Forest of Noise is way better than Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. That's how I felt, at least. Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear was also more conversational. And the second one, Forest of Noise, had more figurative language in comparison. So, okay, so talked about those two. So I think if you're a poet and you just want to get exposed to Muslim writers, I think it would be a pretty good idea just to see like what's out there. Like you want to know what your people are writing about, right? And that was kind of like my idea. And I think because previous video talked about as long as the lemon trees grow, right? Since I actually read these two books before I read As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, and that's actually what made me more interested in finding out, okay, what else have Muslims written and what does it sound like? Because I want to know, um, what they write like and um, especially in English. I want to know what they've written and also like you want to know like what are they giving to the outside world? Like what is the impression that people have of Muslim writers. Just want to know, curiosity. So that was kind of what it was, especially from the creative sense. Like, I think we always talk about writing from a analytical slash academic sense, which is obviously important and it has its place in our society. But also the creative um, writing is very important too because that's how people connect with others. Sometimes people don't connect through academic writing, which is completely fine. So, okay, so I talked about those two for now. Um, and then I think also, no, I'm just final thought. I also appreciated that he used his writing as a platform to talk about his own people and what they're going through. I really appreciated that. So he was not only enjoying his writing, he was being useful with his writing. And if he was, hopefully, if he had the right intention, he was doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, you know. Okay, so another book that I started reading, as I said, because I'm in this quest to try to see like what people have out there. Is I just started reading um this book. Oops, I want to go back because I already told you guys that I kind of read, especially when it comes to poems and personal essays. Yeah, that's always gonna be read in conjunction with something else. But I'm focusing a lot on like nonfiction and things like that. So I'm reading this. I just started. Did I start yesterday? Yeah, I started yesterday. So yesterday is August 19th. Just saying, because I don't know how I'm gonna put this up. Um, so I'm reading this book. It's called There's Always This Year by Hanif Abdurraqqib. Yeah, Hanif Abdurraqqib. There's always this. So it's called There's always this year. Why does it say tier? Okay, there's always this year. Anyways, so I started reading this book. Okay, and in the beginning I was confused because I was trying to understand how. So me when I'm reading, I don't just read. Like I read and I analyze. Like I kind of do this. I kind of do the two things at the same time. So I was reading this and I was trying to understand how he had it structured because every poet or nonfiction writer structures things differently. Now, the thing is, nonfiction is unique in that it's structured in a way that you have, to an extent, you have free reign. Like you can kind of structure it how you want to structure it. However, when it comes to fiction, that's generally pretty linear. Like you follow the plot diagram, okay, where you have the climax in the middle, and then you have you know falling action, and then you have the exposition and the resolution. So you follow the plot diagram, generally speaking, when it comes to fiction. Unless you're talking about Native American literature, that's usually not linear. Um, which is why for me Native American uh, literature is very difficult for me to follow. And if you really wanna, yeah, it follows the circular method. So what happens in Native American literature is it oftentimes starts like in the middle of the story, and then it kind of um like let's say it follows let's say it starts in the climax, and then it kind of works from there. So that's why for me, Native American, like if you want to challenge yourself in terms of reading, because I told you that today, the writing is very unchallenging. Part of the mystique of reading is being able to like unravel something like a puzzle. If I'm just sitting here and I already know what the plot is, or I have an idea about how it's gonna end, I don't know what to say. Oh, 1 second. I can't even see my laptop anymore. Dang. So don't know where I saw, but yeah. So as I was saying, American Native American literature is usually they don't follow the linear method of the plot diagram, which is very straightforward. I would say Native American literature causes you to really think about what you're reading. Okay, so anyways, I don't know how I kind of side quested like that, but let's get back to this. So I started reading Hanif Abdurraqqib's book. Okay, now my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe someone here has some knowledge that I don't. My understanding is that Hanif maybe wrote more than one book, and he has like several things that he's written. I just chose this one because this is the one that I saw like reviews and raves about online. So I was like, okay, like maybe this is like a great way for me to be introduced to his writing. So so when I went ahead and I started reading, I started analyzing the way he structured it. And upon analyzing how he structured it, I realized that he structured it in such a way so it looks like he really likes basketball. So he structured his writing, he structured it as a second, countdown seconds, um like in a basketball court. So everyone, because I got confused. I was like, what are these subtitles? What are these numerical subtitles? I was so confused and I was trying to understand it. So I looked it up. Okay, because I want to understand. So as the seconds go down, the pace and tempo of his writing kind of quickens a little bit. And the way he does that is that, for example, let's say where the subtitle is 3 minutes, okay? And it's counting down. Okay, and then let's say the subtitle before was 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So, and he ends that chapter or section, whatever you want to call it, because I'm only on page 17, or 18. He ends it with a sentence that's not completed, but then it continues on in the next section. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. He also plays around with run on sentences where he does not pause his thoughts. And I think he does that to make it seem like it's going fast. There's no, and it also kind of like puts you in his thoughts. Now, I didn't even tell you guys what this is about. So I already told you I'm not even done with this, but I might do like a part two to this. He's on page so I'm on page 18. He essentially kind of writes a memo. It's kind of like a personal essay, like a collection of personal essays, my understanding, but he writes it with a cadence that is similar to poetry. That's why I was confused because I looked it up online. It says personal essays, collection of personal essays and poetry. So I guess he put them together. Now I can't really say too much because your girl has not gotten too far into it. I just started it yesterday, 17, 18 pages. So there you go. So yeah, so it seems like he put them together. Now I have never seen an author do this. Like I've never read like a nonfiction where there's both personal essays and poetry. So I don't know if that is actually the case here, but so far I do kind of see that poetry cadence, but he does do it in a conversational tone again, because contemporary poetry is more conversational. Okay. And that was like, the shift and the change in poetry. And that's kind of like actually the main change between contemporary poetry and olden poetry. I'm calling it olden poetry, okay? If you want to, I know it has a different term, so I'm just gonna say that. Um, but and also another thing is I feel like the older poetry, it takes a lot more work. It really does. And it's not to say the poetry of today doesn't take work, because you still kind of technically have to follow the same, um, should have some of the same elements, but it's just not as tough on the structure, I guess. Um, so yeah. Now, another thing I want to say about Hanif's writing so far is his writing is not, again, it's kind of like I'm just telling you how it is, how I read it. His writing is not PG. Like, this boy got a lot of cuss words in here. And personally, I don't like to read things that have a lot of cuss words just because I feel like writing is should be refined, should be a refined and elevated way of speaking. And I think that writing should be used in that way. Where it's like, I think it should be preferred, like it's preferred for you to write in an elevated and refined way. Okay. He does use a lot of cuss words, and I'm only on page 18. So I think that's something that I'm not really a fan of. I'm just kind of yeah, I don't really like that. So that was interesting. So I think that's kind of my thoughts on that so far, but I do find it interesting, the run-on sentences that he's using. The thing is I always thought he just keeps on talking and talking and talking, okay? Like he puts a lot of comments in there. And the thing is, every writer, because again, this is my first introduction to his writing. I like you kind of figure out someone's voice, like a writer's voice, like what does it sound like the more you get into the writing. So you kind of figure that out as you're writing. So I don't know if this normal because I haven't read any of his other stuff, but that's just what I'm noticing. And I think also he's making it more lengthy. Like, also, I don't know how this looks like because I have my Kindle right here, but I don't know if, like, how is this actually structured on a page? But yeah, like, he's got one whole sentence in my whole thing. Like, I tell you, like, that's one entire sentence. So I'm slightly annoyed because I didn't realize I talk a lot too, but like, I didn't realize that this was kind of annoying me, but it also might be because he is structuring this as like a basketball countdown scene situation. So that might be it too. Okay, so enough about Hanif. Um, let's see. So I talked about those three books. Okay. Also want to talk about this book. Don't mind this. My hair bonnet was on this. And then because it's purple and then I don't know, just don't look at that. So this book is for the poetry person, poet, starting poet who wants to get some more tips. This book, I mean, you need to have like some patience though. This book is pretty old. It's written in 1994. Which that's how you know it's a good. Most likely, it's gonna have some information in here. Okay, let me check on that. Check and give you the correct information. Yep, copyright 1994. Yep, I was correct. Um, so, Mary Oliver's A Poetry Handbook is like a very basic guide about understanding poetry and the elements in writing. Now, I think most writers, when they start writing poetry, they're like, oh yeah, I could just put a couple emotions on the page and, I got something set up. But I think it's also you get to a point where you understand, okay, like poetry is like any other kind of endeavor where it needs to be polished. Okay, you need to actually work on your skill. You cannot work on your skill unless you learn from the people who were before you and people who actually have acclaimed work and see like what they have to say on this topic and then kind of gauge for yourself like what your own thoughts are, right? One second. So now it took me a while to get this, like for me to read it. Um, but I think it does a really good job kind of breaking down like the history. Like it gives you like a basic history. Like I mean, this book is not that long. You can probably sit down and read it in one sitting if you really wanted to. But that wasn't my goal. My goal was to actually sit with it and like learn stuff from it. This book is about 122 pages. So it talks a little bit about the history, and it does so in a way that's not overwhelming of poetry. It talks about the Italians on it, the English or the Shakespeareans on it. So it talks about a lot of forms. Um, I think she did a really good job because I feel like a lot of time poems or people who write poetry or sorry, poet can't even speak today. Poets who try to teach you more about poetry, they overwhelm you too much. Okay, but she did a really good job of breaking it down, right? So it talks about different forms of poetry. It talks about the length. It talks about rhyme. It talks about breadth. It talks about, let's see, stanzas, syllables, and what that looks like. It talks about iambic pentameter. It talks about free verse, which is basically like kind of the shift that we've seen in recent years. The tone and the content, pauses and structure. Also, if you put how much you indent in the beginning, how much space, because also poetry is not just it's the space, it's the visual what the author really sees, and then the pauses and the structure and the things like that. It talks about rhyme, diction, tone, voice. It talks about cliches and what that does to your writing, like pitfalls and stuff like that. I honestly think this is a pretty good, handy dandy manual to have if you really want to kind of get an understanding of poets. I would actually, me personally, I would say this is something that you should have as a starting writer. They have other books out there, which I got another poetry handbook, which is a bigger one and it's more intense than this one. But I'm happy that I started with this one because this one is like easy on the eyes and it's not like gonna like deter you away, basically. Um, yeah, it's not gonna deter you away. And it has I wouldn't say does it have any exercises here? This one doesn't have exercises. The other one that I have, it has exercises. But what I like is it also explains stresses and unstresses. Now, the thing is, I feel like stresses and unstresses is like probably one of the hardest things for you to understand, at least I think, in poetry. But it explains it when you read it once, get another handbook and read it another time and read it again. Just get different perspectives on the same thing. Eventually it will stick and you'll understand. I'm starting to understand it more, um, just because I read this other thing. Let me see. Dang, I've been here for a while. Um, I read this other poetry collection called Sea Changes. Now, Sea Changes is a different kind of poem. I don't even know why it hasn't gotten as much hype as it should be getting hype. I just finished this one. Did I finish it yesterday? Yeah. It's a narrative poem in sprung pentameter. Now, the writer, let me see his name, is Boman Desai. Now, Bowman, he was courteous enough to provide an introduction where he talked about how he started writing the book and like how he got into it. And then he ended it with more explanation on the writing. And he spent a good like so after he finished his poem, he did a personal note, okay, at the end of the poetry collection, where he talked about his experience writing and how he played with form and how he came to that conclusion. Now, Sea Changes, this is a really good poem. Okay. It's a narrative poem and it discusses the interlude between two people that just met and like what that situationship look like. But he does it in such a way that it's very classy the way he does it. And it's kind of like you play a lot of word there's a lot of words spaghetti, so you have to like puzzle through what he's actually saying. Um but it is kind of R-rated. So I didn't know it was gonna be R-rated when I read it. Um but again, when you read a lot of poetry, it kind of gets you, especially contemporary poetry, you want to see the difference between poetry of today and poetry of back then. And that's also part of being a writer. I think um, s- this is one, uh, I think it is. I think it's a failure of the education system, okay, I can't even speak. Education system, where okay, we do read poetry, but it's not enough poetry, where it's not like you just read the classics and you're not spending enough time reading what people of today are writing and what that sounds like. I think it's important to get a variety to kind of get a feel of it. And also, I don't think that teachers are equipped, well, most English teachers are equipped to talk about poetry. And I'll be honest, I don't think they should have every English teacher talk about poetry because not, I don't think that they say profess it out loud, but not every English teacher likes poetry, which is weird. I know, weird. Not every teacher likes the poetry. That's so odd to me. How could you? But yeah, I don't think they do. So I think they should probably have like specific teachers handle that curriculum because you wouldn't be able to do it justice if you don't like it. So yeah, and another thing is because I feel like poetry is kind of viewed as the um calculus in some ways, the calculus of English, because it's like a mysterious thing that you have to explore, and you can only explore it if you're passionate. Honestly, you have to be very passionate to talk about it. Like you have to have a sort of passion. You can't just, and if you like poetry, then you know like, oh, that person really likes words. That's how you know, I feel like, that someone really likes words is if they like poetry. Because if you're okay with like going through poetry salad and like demystifying it for yourself in your brain and like trying to like go through the cocktail of someone else's brain and just trying to understand what they were trying to relate to you, and that means you really like words. I think so. I think that's how I would say it. But I think that's all I have for today because it's getting kind of long. But if I have any thoughts on the Hanif poetry collection, I will definitely bring that up next time. Then again, I don't try to read quick because, I have a lot of things happening. So, anyways, see ya until the next time. Assalamu alaikum.